Okay, everyone. Well, I'm back on the conversations track with my good friend and mentor, Professor Ben Teehankee. Hi, Prof. Ben. Nice to have you back.
Hi, Doc. We're here again for a nice conversation.
Ito na naman tayo. So, obviously, fresh off the press, no, we had that AI summit about a week ago as of this recording. Any ano ba? Any takeaways you had from that summit? I remember you had a few thoughts towards the end. No? Just wanted to get your sense of it, and then let's build on that now.
Yeah, I think that summit was in many ways a breakthrough. I think the composition of the group made for very rich exchanges, no, very penetrating insight into different aspects of the AI issue. And I like the way it was framed as part of nation building. And I think that has to be pursued further. No? What do we mean by that? And in particular, I'm interested in the national development aspect of it. Kasi nga, we do hear a lot of concerns, including from myself, on the possible harms of AI. Pero sa tingin ko, of course, we need to clarify what we mean by ethics and what harms are there. No? But more importantly, how can we harness AI for national development? I think that's a worthwhile follow-up discussion to the summit.
Yeah, and maybe just from my own parang reaction as the moderator, it feels like we were mostly talking along the same lines, pero parang our semantics were getting jumbled up across multiple speakers. So baka one thing we can aim to do, maybe starting now, is try to unify that taxonomy of terms, lalo na in particular the concepts of safety and ethics, which are obviously universal. You've been talking about business ethics for some time, pero it's only now that these ideas are coming to fore, at least in the mainstream. So most people will not relate to that, in my view. And then with regards to AI, coming from, I guess, the quote unquote the trauma of data
Yeah.
science and big data, it was largely very how should I say it? Parang technology centric. So people kind of dismiss it as an IT thing. I'm worried that the AI conversation will follow the same track, knowing what's happening now, which
Yeah,
I think is really unproductive. So tama ka,
it can
it should be
happen.
about nation building and how do we ground the ethics conversation para everyone can relate to it, diba?
Kasi all hands on deck ito eh. Itong national development is our all hands on deck. Or we should say, in the language of AI, all minds on deck.
Yeah,
No, we have to harness really Filipino minds for the development challenge that we have.
yeah. I would actually imagine, ito hindsight na lang to, Monday morning quarterbacking. We had a very good series of speakers dun sa panel natin. Of course, you, Professor C, even Lian and Attorney Santiago and si
Yep,
Jelaine
yep.
from KPMG. But
Oo.
I would have loved to have had like a private sector C level, no, CIO maybe or something, to give the perspective of companies. Kasi nga, we had some private sector panels there, pero it wasn't really much into parang AI safety or ethics. That's one. And
Tama, tama.
then syempre, bringing government in would be a totally different can of worms. No? The government will have a different
Oo,
take on
oo.
it. And depende pa yan if it's a government policymaker or a government agency looking to
Yes.
use AI itself, para mag-iba pa yun, di ba? Yun yung challenge.
Oo, oo. In
Okay.
fact, I wanted to, with your permission, if I can show some slides,
Yeah,
because
please.
I want to build an argument for national development but powered by AI. So if I can share, let me
Yeah, go
see.
ahead.
And if you don't mind, I will just be jumping from slide to slide,
Yeah.
and then you can feel free to dialogue at any time. Okay. So
Okay.
this is how I wanted to frame it there. National development with ethical and safe AI. Ang shortcut term ko dyan is simply good AI. No?
Mhm.
But let's take the big picture first. I always like to remind people of what our vision is as a country because it's really what unites us. And the Constitution is very clear. The vision of the country is to free the people from poverty, meaning really it's a quality of life, quality of life for all. And
Mhm.
that is done through adequate social services to be done by government. But this is key. Promote full employment because this is the linchpin of national development. No country has developed without providing quality jobs for as many people as possible. You only have to look at the Commonwealth countries, the Scandinavian countries, and of course our neighbors, no, Singapore, especially Korea. So that's the key. But all of this depends on the development of human beings, and this is where some frameworks help. No, for example, uh, let's use this. No, human development and value creation. When we speak of a quality of life for people, people need material goods. And this is where businesses are so important because businesses generate financial resources. And financial resources are able to secure for people the basics of a decent life. Not necessarily a luxurious life, right? What are we talking about? The usual FSC: food, shelter, clothing. These are essentials. But you also have to include mobility, transportation. You also have to include communications. Nowadays, you cannot call a mobile phone a luxury anymore. You cannot even go to a mall with your family if you cannot coordinate among family members, right? So telecommunications and the internet is already declared as a human right.
Right.
That's already part of material goods. So when we speak of material goods here, we're not talking of money. We're thinking of what it means to live a human life. So all of these are important. But we're also talking about flourishing. No? So once you have the basic decent aspects of life, you have to flourish as a human being. Obviously, we do not live for bread alone, right? So even if you have a house, you have good clothes, you can go from point A to point B, and you have a decent enough mobile phone. It doesn't mean you're growing as a human being. And that's actually quality of life. No? So there's the basic life for which you need essentially a living wage, and then there is additional resources that you need to flourish. And what are these aspects of flourishing? And here I already mentioned some ways that AI can help. For example, health is the most basic. We have to improve our fitness, our health. We know that there is so much lifestyle diseases, even mental health issues. There are already a lot of AI tools that are available for health services, pharmaceutical delivery. You can put your conditions there and it automatically optimizes, triggers orders from your pharmaceutical company. Some apps will even email your doctor whether you're following your regimen, right? And then it reminds you when to take your meds. And then, of course, there's telemedicine, there's fitness apps. Over here, for emotional development, which is very important because a lot of people are suffering from mental health issues because they go off the rails on issues. No, they get upset over the war in Ukraine or some bashing that happens on the internet. People need a lot of attention to be able to temper their emotional regulation. May mga ano dyan, assertiveness coaching tutorials that are AI driven. There are of course meditation apps that even trace your alpha waves, etc. And then, of course, aesthetics, the things we like to enjoy. Music gives us recommendations, right? Spotify, Netflix gives us recommendations based on our preferences. Ebooks are now so dynamically prepared that they even have features clickable to videos, clickable to movies, art events. The last time I was in Sweden, you go to an art event, you wear augmented reality glasses. Then, as you see art, you see the literature on the art, you see videos of the artist giving a talk. You know, it's floating in space, so it enhances the aesthetic experience. So, all of these are really ways of not just living the minimum materially decent life, which is important, but actually a life that is fuller and more human. And this is what modern societies try to do. But I don't know what you think.
I have a question.
In our country,
If I
yes, I
may know.
was hoping you could comment, Doc.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is great. I mean, there are similar, let's say, frameworks that I think we even discussed one in kind of our original conversation. What I'm
Indeed.
wondering though, having seen this, where do we draw the what's the dimension for technology? Because I can see some technologies parang
Yes.
ano here, no? Parang imputed here.
Excellent
So is
question.
technology
Yeah.
an implicit dimension? Parang it affects everything, or do we consider technology kind of a leg in itself, and whether that technology ends up in a way supporting or
Yes.
detracting from this parang human development or value creation?
Yeah,
And how would you classify
yeah, that's an
technology?
excellent question. During the summit, people were referring to technology as tools, right?
Mhm.
And for me, that's one of the ways to view technology in this framework. For
Mhm.
example, I mentioned telecommunications. When the cell phone became available, it was a tool. Definitely, parents now know where their kids were, they can coordinate pickups, etc. And then businesses and suppliers can coordinate via text, so you don't have to over order anymore because you can check the inventory level in the warehouse on real time, right? So these were powerful tools. And AI now is precisely that. Good AI is a tool that can facilitate all the dimensions. And I have to emphasize, it has to be good AI. Because, for example, if you have good AI, it can help improve your health. But if you have bad AI, it can drive you to addiction.
Mhm.
You lose sleep, you become ornery the next day because you binge watch your third, season in a row. And by the
Yeah.
way, I speak from experience. So these things have to be managed very carefully. So AI is part of what you acquire as a material good for the basics of life, because now, for those who drive, I think ways can already be called essential. Because
Correct.
mobility is essential. You have to go places. In the past, you couldn't go because you didn't know how to go. Now, with Waze and starting with 4G, real-time, driving apps became possible. That was a truly empowering thing.
So in that case, I don't know if this is an obtuse or you'll cover this later, but kasi one of the things I talk about whenever I reference parang yan, mga apps is unintended consequences or
Ah,
unintended
yes.
uses. No? So
Mhm.
how do you attack that from this perspective? Kasi certainly these are all ideal. No? Yeah, we learn from software, ways helps us get
Yes.
to somewhere.
Yes, yes.
Pero obviously it doesn't always result in that outcome.
Yes,
Is it
precisely.
because of ano ba yan? Is it a failure of human ingenuity, or I mean I don't know
Yes.
how we can capture that
Yeah.
somewhere, no?
I think you bring in the important issue of alignment, no?
Yeah.
Alignment and safety. Because good AI, which is what is presupposed here, have to be both aligned and safe, okay? Uh, Let me bring up a short slide I prepared on that, no? So, good AI is what we call trustworthy AI. And aligned AI means the system aims for a goal that is compatible with human moral values. Now, this sounds how highfalutin,
Mhm.
but truth telling is a basic value. That's why one of my comments in one of the summits was that fakeness is sometimes seen as a non-ethical issue.
Oo nga, parang we normalized falsehoods, no?
Exactly.
Parang mali.
Exactly. Fakeness, by definition, is not a positive thing. Now, of course, if you're using it for entertainment, it has to be communicated as a simulation for that matter. And here, businesses sometimes exaggerate advertising, right? But then you can see at the bottom of the screen, this is a simulation and is not meant to literally say that something is so and so. If you go to a condo company, you will see a brochure with very green gardens in front of the building. But if you go to the actual building, there isn't even any grass. Now, obviously, it's a Photoshop. In fact, we started experiencing this when digital technologies became available, right? Photoshop. Kaya pag sinabi mong Photoshop, it's already an implied ethical dig at something. Now, there is some fakeness involved. Now, I mentioned truth telling because, for example, itong mga large language models, when they start to spout certain things, for example, like in one session, I asked ChatGPT to tell me about myself. It said I had a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. This is, by the way, university number 4 because it has claimed that I come from so many universities.
Dami na.
And then that I'm a senior editor of these journals. These are the top journals in ethics. I will live and die and never even publish in these journals, and it claims I'm an editor, no? And of course that I have been cited by all of these things. So is that truth telling? Is that safe AI? Well, come to think of it, we are actually making the wrong conclusion kasi about ChatGPT. ChatGPT was never designed to tell the truth.
Mhm.
It was designed to predict the next word. based on its training data. And predicting the next word can sometimes lead to what we call bullshit. Bullshit was a term formalized by Harry Frankfurt, a professor of philosophy. His book on bullshit was written 1986, but it was reissued 2005. And he said, the bullshitter is neither on the side of the true or the side of the false.
Okay.
So we should not be upset at ChatGPT because it was never designed to tell the truth, except that we project our anthropomorphic expectations on it. That's why it should be actually couched as more of an entertainment tool, or I'd like to say a prototype creativity tool. That's how I see it. Because it plays with words, therefore, as it plays with words, it's like you're listening to a poet, no? But he's not sounding poetic. He's speaking in prose, but you can treat what it's saying as poetry, right?
Right.
He does not, his eye is not on the facts at all. Because remember, a large language model has no world model. It has never experienced anything, right? It's just bits and pieces in a computer with algorithms that give it a model based on words. No, he does not reject the authority of the truth, as the liar does, and oppose himself to it. He pays no attention to it at all. By
Yeah.
virtue of this, bullshit is a greater enemy of the truth than lies are. This is what we mean. It can seem innocuous because it's spouting words. The problem is that ChatGPT is actually not making mistakes. It is doing what it is designed to do, which is to create coherent prose.
Mhm.
The problem is the reader thinks it is saying the truth. This is where the problem lies. And so, for example, what I showed you earlier, people who introduce me in conferences ask ChatGPT. And you ask them why? Because they think ChatGPT will tell them the truth.
Yeah,
What they should know,
they
yes,
confuse it with a database or a search
exactly.
engine, which is I think
Yes,
kasalanan ni OpenAI
yes.
yan eh.
Yes, well, kasi ang OpenAI naman may fine print sa baba, di ba? It
Yeah.
says that this may be, this is prone to say things that are not factual, especially about people, facts, places, and so on. If you were to ask me, that should be in big font at the start
Yeah.
instead of a small font. I'll give an example, no? Kasi one of my favorite professors in YouTube, he produces a lot of content. This is a professor, si Hans Georg Moeller,
Mhm.
right? He's a philosopher, but he's a YouTube content creator. But you can see in every video, he puts this warning. Now, warning, this video is produced for attracting your attention
Tama.
and to promote this channel. See, he's very transparent. The platform you are using is designed to be addictive and to mine your data for profit. This kind of transparency is the same thing that we require of cigarettes. But it was the law that required it. The cigarette companies were denying that cigarettes were harmful to the very end. In fact, in ASEAN, Doc, I'm sure you know this.
They funded research that said smoking is safe.
Yes, yes. Or
Which is
or when they
completely
couldn't push the safe anymore, they just made it doubtful.
uh,
Kasi they found out it was enough to create doubt,
okay.
di ba? And in ASEAN, you probably know this, the Philippines was one of the last to implement the graphic warnings in the boxes because the tobacco companies lobbied to postpone the implementation of that. I've been going around ASEAN, they had the graphic warnings already. The Philippines was one of the last.
To
So
to align. Yeah.
even though the science was already well established that it would cause so many things for pregnant women, for men, my eldest brother died of lung cancer and he was a chain smoker. Now, this is an example, right? It's not saying don't use platforms that explicitly use AI to drive content to viewers, right? And we know all social media sites do this. But the importance of trustworthiness and ethics is transparency. You say it ahead of time.
Mm.
And I know this sounds funny, right? Because if we follow this principle, all malls should have a sign at the entrance that says, caution, this mall is designed to empty your pockets. But that's the that's the ethical thing to do. Because when you see high school students going to malls, their parents don't always know that they're using their allowance there, right? But they should be told that, that's what a mall does. It's there to encourage you to spend. So you better have a very clear budget before you enter a mall.
Yeah.
Or you should be very good at resisting the persistence of, di ba yung mga sales people lalapit sa'yo, and then before you know it, naubos yung budget mo. So that's why the first thing we're saying, and I'm glad you brought up the ethical aspect, is on how to position this for development. Because if we do that, we will really achieve a rising standard of living for all. But when we say rising standard of living, we mean this, no, and not what we see here. These are the negative things. If AI is used improperly instead of what I showed before, right? What we will see is polarization and democratic failures.
Yeah.
Humans are flourishing like tayo ever since we met each other. I think my life has flourished. I hope yours has too. You've opened my life to so many things. But how did we meet? Through technology, right?
Oo nga. Parang almost by
Di ba?
accident.
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
was that possible before social media came around? No, it was not. And now I've met so many people using networks, but the same thing, ito yung sinasabi mo unintended consequences. Because of AI algorithms that push for engagement, meaning the length of time you stay. I stay with you because we stimulate ideas in each other. But if the algorithm are causing us to have disagreements, and because of that we are now bashing each other, and then we invite our friends to join the bash fest, etc., that's what we are seeing. And AI is completely doing that mechanically. It has no conscience naman eh. Hindi naman niya alam na pinagsasabong niya mga tao. He just realizes that doing that increases engagement. Diba?
At
Kasi
saka
yun yung nasa
ano
algorithm niya.
actually it only occurred to me relatively recently that the polarization is really a feature. It's not a bug. In other words,
It's not. It's
uh,
not.
if you have a system
Yes.
that encourages segmentation to marketing, di ba?
Yes.
And it will find ways to
Exactly.
segment. And hindi man natin na-realize
Yes.
that one of the best ways to segment people is through hate. Through
Yes.
hate, through
In fact,
disinformation,
yeah, in
polarization.
fact, it was an accidental finding of the algorithm.
Uh,
It did not intend it. Its goal was to maximize engagement. But it compared nag-ano siya A/B testing, di ba? Sinabi niya, oh, what if we find people with common interests? How long will they stay? Okay, they stay mga 2 hours a day. And but what if people are disagreeing over something? How many times will they exchange? My God, up to 6 hours because they're disagreeing and they're bashing. And in fact, yung mga responses are just short, pithy, yung mga titira lang, yung mga one sentence. Pero ang dami. So sabi ni AI, this is the way to go. Diba?
yeah,
If I can find more groups that are most likely to disagree, I will invite them to join the festival. Para siyang summit, pero instead of looking for like-minded people in a summit, you actually look for people with the higher chances of disagreeing.
tama.
But on the other side, dito naman sa cognitive side, no, flourishing means improving the mind. Eh. But what has happened? Again, these are all unintended, I'm sure. Pero the results are uncritical thinking. You believe in whatever you hear, you pass it on. Addictions, this is
Yeah,
well established.
can I briefly
Yes.
ask me elaborate on that? Kasi syempre there's a recurring, I would say, conspiracy theory na this is part of the strategy of the elites, no, to keep the masses basically dumb so that they can control. And of course, it sounds very, I mean, my view lang muna, it sounds very charming and I might actually believe it. Pero could you really engineer a dumb population, or is this just a series of unfortunate events kataon na?
Well, I'm glad you raised that, no? Kasi you raise a broader issue of propaganda in general.
Mhm.
Now, if we look at the history of nations, and this is even prior to the Nazis perfecting propaganda to the highest level, no?
Oo nga, they invented the art of it, no? The science of
Yeah,
it.
well, they perfected it, but if you look back, even through Roman times and even,
Meron na.
Egyptology, in fact, we think of Cleopatra as a very beautiful woman, di ba? But if you look at actual coins during Cleopatra's time, she was not pretty at all. But depending on which story you heard, you have this picture of her, right? So how publics are led to think was standard fare for governments. In fact, this was the problem of Socrates, if you remember,
Yeah.
because Socrates would go out and talk to people and ask them, "Why do you believe X?" Let's say it's something that the government says, and then the person will say, "Oh, because ganyan ganyan." Oh, but if you believe X, you would believe Y, correct?
Mm, tama.
But Y is ridiculous. So therefore, what do you think? Socrates will just, and so nakarating sa government na who is this guy? He's
Causing all
under,
this ruckus, no?
yes, he's undermining everything we've led the people to believe.
Oo.
I think that's why he was tried, and you know what the verdict was. Now, of course, when technology came, meaning the printing press, the loudspeaker, the megaphone, the mimeograph sheet, and World War II, yan na. And then television, of course, and radio. Now, it's not just governments that did this, Doc. Even businesses did it, right? So you're told that this kind of oil is healthy for you, or that you need to have this kind of toothpaste, or that you should shampoo every day. All of that is false. You don't even have to shampoo every day. But if you see an ad of shampoo every day, you think you have to. That's why so many people have lost their hair because they shampoo every day, including myself, by the way. But the thing is, propaganda or misleading publics is part of standard practice. We don't even see it as a Machiavellian anymore. As
Yeah.
we said earlier, we've already normalized it. But when laws came out, like the Consumer Protection Act, for example, or the laws on implied warranties against hidden defects, nagkaroon ng konting defense yung mga tao. And then in governments, lumabas yung mga Freedom of Information Acts. By the way, the Philippines is one of only 3 countries who doesn't have a Freedom of Information Act. So you cannot demand that a government agency show you the minutes of a meeting, let's say, of the Monetary Board or the Competition Commission. In other countries, they can require that. You just have a waiting period. Let's say after 3 years or 2 years, you can ask for the minutes because you want to know how was this decision made, who were in that meeting, and you can hold them accountable. In the Philippines, good luck because I have filed the Freedom of Information request several times. I have waited in vain; it doesn't come out. Now, but when captology came, captology is now the use of computers for propaganda. This is entirely different.
Yeah.
Kasi the previous models was just dissemination. So you had a claim, whichever, a business exaggerated claim or a government exaggerated claim, but you would transmit it through traditional means. When computers came along, they now added the transmission with the reinforcement component. We will remember from psychology that you can reinforce an animal to behave by giving it a reward, right? So, uh, businesses perfected this, starting with the airline industry with rewards points. We call them miles, diba? If you travel X miles, you get a cheaper rate the next time. In fact, if you hit X thousand miles, you even get a free ticket, no? Things like that. Yung that behavior modification Pinerfect yan ng airline industry, and then the same rewards mechanism transferred to all industries. Everybody does that now. We know that, right? Malls, hotels, even motels do it. Tapos they
Mm.
motivate through the taxi cabs. No? If you use this motel X times, you get a discount on this. Uh, Companies do it. If you are always on time, they will give you a free microwave,
Pero
etc.
I would consider that more of a maybe market operation, which actually leads to a different problem altogether, moral hazard of any market. But going back to this,
Yeah, but just
yeah,
to complete my point, Doc, you're right.
uh,
When it's used in the market, it's either a promotion tool,
yeah,
right? And promotion is fine as long as what you're saying is factual, or it's already behavior modification tool.
yeah,
Behavior modification tool means the promotion comes with an incentive which is automatically switched on if you reach a certain threshold.
right,
And this is called captology. This was perfected by Dr. Fogg in Stanford. You can look this up. Captology is the way computers are used to persuade people. So this is propaganda on steroids.
yeah,
The people who went to that program of Dr. Fogg on captology are the experts who started the incentive programs in the social media companies. So if you look at MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, there are always captology experts there, meaning they know how to create algorithms that give you incremental rewards every time you do a behavior.
Yeah.
right? So in effect, we are all in Skinner boxes, all of us. That's why yung warning ni Professor Moeller is spot on. This platform is really designed to cause you to be an
To
addict.
grab your attention. No?
Yeah, and to
I'm
cause you.
wondering though, do you know of any, or what's the view on, does making people aware of it help them manage it? Because there's I mean, I keep citing an article before that disinformation can be, you can be inoculated against
Yeah,
disinformation, for example, no, by showing examples of it. But in this case, I think this is a more parang more insidious level, no, where you're not even aware that
yes,
you're being
yes,
addicted. Pero pag sinabing, okay, this is really meant to addict you, does it actually help you resist
yes.
it? I don't know.
Yes, there is research on that. The research is very clear. Now, it does not affect those who are already addicted, but the number of new addictions will plateau very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it will plateau very quickly, which is why in the anti-smoking campaign, it was very powerful and it triggered a lot of the tobacco companies to diversify. You know this, the biggest tobacco companies in the world are already diversified. What did they do? They bought food companies.
Yeah.
So more and more, the chunk of their revenue coming just from tobacco is becoming smaller and smaller. Even Philip Morris has already announced that they will already achieve tobacco-free smoking. That's their goal
Yeah.
because the handwriting is in the wall. And of course, for the longest time, most of their growth was coming from Asia. Where is the where is the biggest Philip Morris factory in this part of the world? In the Philippines, of course. Because if they tried setting that up in the modern economies, they would not be welcome there. But because the level of awareness in the Philippines is not so good, see, that's why the biggest growth market is in Asia. But
And
because
then
of
there's also
social
such a thing as
media,
a parang a net consumer market. No? Like I remember talking to si Dr. Didis Rodrigo of Ateneo. We were in the same webinar just the other
she's
day.
a good friend of mine. She did it. Yes. What
Ayun.
did you talk about? Yeah.
Anyway, so obviously, well, she's from the computer science
Yes.
field, right?
Yes.
And one of her disappointments down was when she meets yung mga representatives of the big tech, IBM, Google, etc. Here in the Philippines, they're really mostly salespeople, and I know this for a fact because I used to work with one of the such vendor,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
they deal with the Philippines as a net consumer market. So from her perspective, she found it frustrating kasi syempre as a professor, she wanted her students sana to find a way to collaborate with these big tech and maybe do an internship or two. But
Yes.
they're really not here for research and development. Or maybe the research is happening, but we're really more of a petri dish, but the research is happening
Yes.
somewhere else. So
Yes.
I mean, from her perspective, it's almost useless dealing with them, at least from here. If you
Yeah.
really want to deal with, kunyari, the scientists of
Hmm.
IBM, Google, etc., the nearest place you can fly to is Singapore because they have
Singapore.
some R&D there, which
And
I
we're
find
trying.
actually quite
Yeah. Yeah.
sad. No, na parang we don't have a voice or our voice is
Well,
limited to consumption.
yeah, I'm glad you're pointing this out, because what you're saying is a basic issue of dignity, right? If we are used as a market for a product, why do we not have a voice?
Yeah,
Obviously, that's a very undemocratic practice,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Kaya nga ang sabi natin, if you are choosing, like sinabi mo kanina, if you're already informed but you still choose to use a harmful product, that's on you.
yeah.
That's on you because you were told. You're using your mind, so you have choice, right? The problem is kung hindi ka nga involved. And this is where education is key. Because speaking of big tech, I've always been an admirer of the responsible AI standard of Microsoft. This came out late 2018 because of their book, The Future Computed. And for me, this is one of the simplest ways to develop good
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
Make sure that in development process there is fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security,
Ah,
inclusiveness,
y-
transparency and
you
accountability.
made me remember another point because there was this documentary on Netflix called it's not the ano eh, it's not the Great Hack. There's another one. This is about how algorithms are influencing us. Anyway, long story short, parang the conclusion,
Coded, the coding
coded
something.
bias. No, there's another
Coded.
one. Although I like that one. That was about
Ah,
discrimination
baka
naman.
yung kay Humane Technology, yung kay kay
Yeah.
Tristan Harris.
Anyway,
Pero
basta
social
the
dilemma pala yun.
social dilemma. There you go. So
Mm.
the
Mm.
parang that conclusion was, or at least it was trying to make out was, itong mga creators of these systems, these developers and scientists, they seem completely at a loss or clueless about how their work has already mutated into something nefarious. And they feel parang they don't feel any accountability, or they sound like they don't feel accountable for the social ills,
Impacts.
that,
Yeah.
that these technologies have caused. No? So that makes me wonder, are they really just parang blind to the ethics, or maybe from their perspective, I didn't mean anything, I did not intend it. Pero the fact that this became the way it is, parang there seems to be this parang I don't know if I'm using the right term, parang they feel detached from the work
Yeah.
too much.
Well, you're using the key term there. It's really detachment. It's called ethical detachment. Because you have to remember, Doc, the corporate structure, by its nature, creates moral detachment. You remember after World War II, the biggest question was how could a modern country like Germany, famous for producing some of the most advanced thinkers, no? Think Immanuel Kant, think all of these
Exactly.
philosophers, how can they perpetrate the mass murder of 6 million Jews, right?
Yeah, Holocaust, basically. Right?
The Holocaust. Well, there was a flurry of research after World War II led by social psychologists like Ash, Milgram, and so on. What we found out was this: if you put even a saint in some social structures, they become agnostic to ethical issues. The famous experiment of Stanley Milgram was like this. You get volunteers and you tell them that you are in a learning experiment, and then you tell the subject that you are supposed to give electric shock to this other person to encourage him to learn. So you start with small shocks, let's say 10 volts, 15 volts. So the open question is, if the person telling this subject to shock this other person, a person he doesn't even know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because of the official reason that we're teaching him a skill, how far will people go? And the highest voltage there was 400 volts. That's even higher than your AC supply in the
Sino
house,
gumawa ng
right?
study na to? That sounds...
Stanley Milgram, this is a classic experiment. And actually, this is just one. It was a whole range of experiments about conformity and obedience.
How did they get away with this, no, back in the day? No?
Remember, there were no ethical principles on research during that day.
Oh.
But anyway, the videos on this are extensive.
It's
So
like the
the
prison experiment then, no?
yes,
It's
in
another
fact,
one.
that famous Zimbardo experiment is part of this tradition.
What?
Yun naman, the Zimbardo experiment is you assign roles, right?
Right. Oh.
You assign somebody to play guard and you assign somebody to play prisoner. Whichever person you assign to those roles, through time they will play those roles and
They
they will be
imbibe the
reverting.
characteristics, diba? Parang ganun.
And this is what we mean. So what were the findings? You put people in structures, roles, and then you don't make them communicate too much about issues. You just make them do the jobs mechanically. In time, they will behave in a more and more morally detached way. This is what corporate structures tend to do. It's
I,
not
I,
that
have
the
a, I have a
people,
question on that
yeah,
kasi this is your realm eh.
yes,
So detachment is one thing. So baka yun yung initial impulse or whatever.
yes,
But then I want to draw a fine line between people who are malicious and people who are unintentionally malicious. Parang because of your detachment,
unintentionally harmful, yes,
harmful, no?
yeah.
Kasi one
And that
has
was the
a
finding,
bonus,
yes.
oh, di ba?
Well,
So, yun na nga
yeah,
eh, how do we parang make that distinction, or are there different paths to that? Kasi for example, I can relate to this personally. When I used to be in the corporate world, you have the corporate ladder, and that's your
yes,
incentive, no, to move up the
yes,
ladder.
yes.
And in a way, para ka ng AI eh. You learn the skills over
Mm-hmm,
time
mm-hmm.
needed to move
You
up the
play the
ladder.
game, yes.
Yeah, and some of those skills make you a really, I would just say, detestable person in real
Uh-huh.
life. No,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
become ruthless, you become
You
scheming,
step on people on the way
step
up,
on
yeah,
people, you look
yeah,
at people
yeah.
as objects.
Mm-hmm.
So yun na nga eh, how much of that is really like forced on the human nature, and how much of that is actually
Well,
born into us?
the proportion of influence of the kasi you're asking how much of it is personality and innate and how much of it is encouraged by the environment, right? This is always a question. That proportion will vary per person. But what the findings of social psychology has shown is that the portion accounted for by the social environment is always substantial. Always substantial. It will never be so minimal that it has no effect. But
For
of course,
sure.
somebody will character will say, I will blow the whistle. And we have seen famous whistleblowers, right? Hindi talaga matanggap ng sikmura nila eh.
Oh, yun, on that note naman,
Mm.
so I'm jumping all over the place, but
Yes, yes.
kasi there will be a whistleblower if there's abuse. I find that more along the realm of, and just let me know if you agree, more along the realm of like human dynamics. Like if you view human relationships as a complex system,
Indeed.
and if there is a, I don't know, I'm just assuming there's a self-correcting ano parang parameter there that you for a kumbaga maybe a system can tolerate systemic abuse for a while, but at some point, based on some I don't know fundamental principle, the system will reboot or correct. So whistleblowers are, in my view, eventually inevitable, given a long enough systemic I know abuse, and maybe the more
Yeah,
modern abusers are aware of that now. How do we make sure there will be no one blowing the
yeah,
whistle?
yeah.
Parang ganun. I don't know.
Well,
Do you agree with that, or is that something that
Well,
you would
on the
guess to?
on the theory that it's a guaranteed outcome that whistleblowers will emerge to trigger a re-examination of an abusive system, I'm not that optimistic.
Not sure. No,
No,
yeah.
I'm not that optimistic. In fact, I tend to believe that the corporate structure, as a petri dish, to use your term, tends to breed the worst in people.
In nature, no.
Why
Oh my
why
god.
is that? Why is that? Imagine the features. You put people in boxes with very clear lines of communication, right?
Mhm.
So let's say I'm your boss and then I'm abusing you, but you're always told communicate through the channels. So you cannot report me to my boss, right? Because it's seen as negative if you don't communicate through channels. So you're told that it's better to accept abuse rather than to skip levels. But if you have an enlightened culture, that's where you have ombudsman structures or hotlines, or you have skip level open door policies where people can talk, then the chances of abuse continuing becomes less and less.
Mhm.
But if you remember what happened in the Me Too movement, it was an open secret that Hollywood had abusive people, but it was going on for decades and decades. Only with the advent of Twitter and social media did it become possible that it was, the lid was opened on the whole thing. Everybody knew it was happening. But suddenly, when more and more women could say, Me Too, Me Too, Me Too, Me Too, you had more than 200 major powerful people in at least 15 countries being convicted. Now, how is that possible before? Not possible. This is one of the areas where I think social media was helpful.
Yeah.
It gave voice to so many who were weak within corporate structures.
Mhm.
And one of the most important finding of the Milgram studies, Doc, that's why I highly recommend that you watch it, is that 30% of everyone went all the way,
Yeah.
meaning they applied the maximum shock of 400 volts. But I think I may have failed to tell you, everything was an act. Huh? The person being shocked was just an actor. He was
Yeah.
not actually being shocked. The subject was the person putting the shock. So when you hit mga 200 volts, the actor inside was already kicking the wall. And then when you hit mga 300 to 400 volts, he was just quiet. In other words, he was already acting that he was already, petrified, frozen. And yet, 30% of the subjects, meaning the ones administering the shock, no matter the educational level, no matter the gender, no matter the socioeconomic status, 30% of people would go all the way. But what happened to the 70%? Some,
Mhm.
even as low as 100 volts, will say, I'm not going to do that. That's a human being in there. In fact, you can see this in the video. It's very well documented. So you're right. Some of them would have such strong character. Maybe it's their upbringing or something their parents told them over the dinner table again and again, do not harm another person, right? Some of them would stand up. And
Yeah.
even in the case of the Nazis, we know that there were at least 6 attempts on the life of Hitler because there were some officers who really felt that what he was doing was wrong. There were many. there were many conscientious objectors among the Germans, and that is very well documented. But whether that is something that will automatically arise in corporate structures, for me, let's not hold our breath.
Let's not go that far, no?
Let's not
Especially in
hold our
some
breath,
extreme cases.
because the corporate structure disarms our ability to self-correct because it separates us, right? It puts us in offices and we don't get to see each other.
Yeah.
So you cannot check with another person na, oh, yung bang boss mo, does he make you work overtime all the time? Eh, hindi mo ma-check yun, right? In fact, you can't even discuss each other's salary, so you don't know if you're a
Yeah.
woman that you're 15% paid less. How would you
I'm
know?
wondering, although ano na, or we're kind of getting into the weeds of the kind of this the framework, no? But in basically your your years of experiencing this corporate I guess circles, you know, from a clinical lens, how much of it is really kind of the hazard of a corporate structure per se, and how much of it is also kind of an overlay of the cultural aspect, no? Parang corporations per se have this parang tendency, but then Philippine corporations more I remember you were doing some sort of a study like
Yeah,
that, no? Parang
yeah.
do are we kind of worse or better, or I don't know if that's a good spectrum,
Well,
no?
let's
Compared
put
to
it
the
this
norm.
way. Yeah, let's put it this way, and you again hit on the core concepts. When we look at the way people behave in a social setting, there are at least three major clusters of factors at play. The first, of course, is the actor himself, his character and his predispositions, right? His personality. So that he brings that with him based on his upbringing, his educational background, and his life experiences. So that's the first, the actor. But then on top of him, floating on top of him, are structures and culture. Structures are the relationships, the resources, the rules that cover his behavior. We call those structures. That's why if you look at an organizational structure, it teaches you that you report to this guy and this guy reports to you. So those are relationships and rules. And then you're told, oh, you have this budget. You cannot go over this budget. To get more, you have to get the approval of this guy. So every time you cite rules, relationships, and resources, you're imposing structure on someone. Even if you're in a room, for example, the way the seats are arranged, who stands in front, are relationships, rules, and resources. It affects the way a teacher interacts with students if the chairs are arranged in a circle, or they're arranged in a in a one to many kind of thing. All of these are part of what we call structure. But there is also the second thing you mentioned, which is culture. Now, what is culture? Culture are the ideas and beliefs that are available for us to adopt. So when you come in, it's like the water. If you're a fish, when you enter the fish pond, what's the water like? You
Yeah.
kind of imbibe it. So for example, does everybody work till 10 here, or nobody goes home unless the boss goes home? So if you're new and you go home at 5, then everybody looks at you funny. Oh, you're not gonna stay here long. And then you say, well, when I was hired, I was told my work hours were 8 to 5. I have a wife, I have a family, I'm going home.
Right.
But everybody else will say, that's crazy. Nobody does that here. Well, where does it say? It's the culture. You're told it's the culture. So the question now is, will you buck the culture or go with the culture? That's
Yeah.
where the actor comes in. So this is really kind of a tango, a dance. Now, in certain hierarchical societies like the Philippines, we tend to be more compliant because we have what we call a high power distance. High power distance culture means tumitingala tayo sa mga taong nasa posisyon. This is very different from, for example, the Nordic countries where you call the CEO by first name, right? And even many Western countries are like that. In highly Hispanic origin countries, we tend to be very high. So if
This is
I'm a
ano, di ba?
yeah,
Hofstede? Is it Hofstede?
yeah,
Something like
Geert
that, no?
Geert Hofstede, yes,
Oh,
the culture and its consequences.
right, right, right.
But there have been updates to that. The basic idea is that the idea of whether you look up to a person in authority, even if his behavior is questionable, depends a lot on culture.
Question mark. That was an anecdote kay ano no,
Mm.
kay Malcolm Gladwell, where he related the Hofstede data. And he was criticized for this,
Ah,
but he related the
yes.
Hofstede data to ano airplane crashes. And this is before the IATA or
Is this
whatever.
Outlier? Which
Outliers,
book?
outliers.
Yeah,
Na parang,
Outliers, right.
parang for the longest time, mga non-English pilots were very, very subject to yan, yung mga Hofstede biases. And there was that Korean Air, forgot the
Ah,
name of
yes.
them.
Kasi very hierarchical din yun eh.
Hierarchical. Yung
Yes,
flight
that's true.
engineer could not challenge the
Yes, yes,
captain,
yes,
And I found that
yes.
amazing, no? Kasi that's kind of like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
an analogy for any corporation.
Yes, yes,
You won't tell your boss that
yes,
you're
yes.
about to head into
Yeah,
certain doom.
in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that is the most dramatic micro simulation of the oppressive nature of a corporate structure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Because
true.
you have people with stripes on their uniforms that says who has the stronger voice,
Mhm.
right? And that's the captain. And you add to that whatever hierarchical culture the native country already has, papatong pa yon,
Mm.
di ba? So that's why after those accidents, nag-meet itong mga airline
Mga
companies,
stakeholders, no?
and they mandated team building for cockpit crews.
Tama.
Kasi nga you
Tsaka
have
the
to
use
be.
of English as a in a way an equalizer, no? So you're not
Yes,
subject to any language
oo.
bias in a
Of
way.
course, we know that language itself does not remove the cultural bias, right? But at
Uh,
least there's
protocol.
something in the channel that you can use.
Yeah.
Kasi in Asian languages, tayo, di ba, po, ganyan,
Yeah, we have those
Japanese,
honorifics, di ba?
sama, ganon. So, even when you say po, kasama na dun yung your opinion is more important than mine. Eh.
Right, right.
So that's what we call by a cultural idea, and cultural ideas are powerful, Doc.
Yeah.
For me, it's like you're in a swimming pool and you're walking across a swimming pool. The culture is what's pushing you back.
Mm.
But is it impossible to deal with? Well, you should learn to swim.
Hindi naman,
If you
yeah.
know
You
the
just have to go with
culture, you can learn to
fight
swim.
the current somehow.
Yeah, how do
Uh,
you make the water work for you?
can I have a provocation on that front? No? Kasi to draw it back on an oblique point sa AI,
Yes.
do we have a culture, I don't know how to phrase it, do we have a national culture that do we feel do we have a national culture of inferiority when it comes to technology? I don't know if it's inferiority or we feel that we don't have that voice. Kasi that's one of the contentious discussions during the summit. Na we're a net consumer, we're not really driving the decision making in these
Well,
models.
let
Do we
me
have
put it,
that?
yeah, let
Is
me
that
put it
something?
this way. I'm always very careful about saying national cultures, no, because,
Delikado.
well, kasi nga, sociology, well, the state of play in social science is that we see a lot of variation in cultural systems. So cultural ideas are more like a buffet of ideas. So if you go to a buffet, you have Japanese food, Chinese food, so they're available, right? And then humans, when they enter a buffet, they choose ideas from the buffet and then they adopt them. So
Mm.
what we have is a buffet of ideas. The tendency, though, is we tend to choose the ideas that favor hierarchy. So, for example,
That's
it
our
is
bias, the
there is a
hierarchical bias.
tendency
Oh,
because of our upbringing to choose the ideas of hierarchy. But the ideas of equality are also there
for
because
sure.
we've had two women presidents, for heaven's sake. How many has the US had, right?
Yeah.
So we also have examples when we say, oh, let's give the leadership to this other person. He might be from a marginalized group, but he has ideas or she has ideas. I mean, how many countries can you have where a city mayor becomes president? That's the Philippines, right? So we are also capable of these swings of development. Pero because nga we choose hierarchy, we also choose the idea of conflict avoidance. So therefore, because of that, we tend not to confront issues. For example, the typical customer tends not to confront management when they're not getting good service.
Yeah.
This is very typical Filipino. So, for example, when I complained to Microsoft about the wrong claims of ChatGPT, I don't think that many Filipinos would do that, right? So, but I knew that that idea was always available. In fact, I did that because I'm an admirer of Microsoft because of
Hey,
their
I have an
fairness
anecdote on
standard
that. No?
here. Yeah,
So
go.
I'm very, very happy that you actually did that and you managed. I'm assuming some change. No? That's the reason why ChatGPT is a bit more hesitant to describe who Ben Teehankee is, and among other people as well. On the other hand, no, actually, it's not on the other hand. In a kind of a parallel parang experience, I'm a business partner of a major tech vendor. I won't mention it, but the way they deal with people like me is we are like distributors of their tech, as
Interesting.
yeah, as opposed to parang partners. So they call us partners. No? And in this particular case, I'm just going to, sorry to sound grandstanding. They literally are not in any conversation related to AI, but they sell AI technology. And in my view, I'm partnering with you so I can help bring you to the market. And I'm actually a path for you to the market. And you're dealing with me like I'm just any distributor. Parang ganun. So parang there's this, it's a power issue. So, and in their view, oh, who the hell are you, doc? You're just another
Hmm.
small time
Hmm.
distributor.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in my head, who the hell are you guys?
Hmm.
You, no one even talks about you. Of course,
Hmm.
you know, you talk big, you're a big vendor, you've got a big brand everywhere else, but not here. So I
Hmm.
feel,
Hmm.
and these are also fellow Filipinos reinforcing this rather, I would say,
Hmm.
very myopic view as a probably a result of their occupation. So I
And the
find that
corporate structure, though.
and the corporate structure, and I
Yeah.
find that interesting because
Hmm.
maybe not so much the maybe a personal reputation issue. I don't really care too much that they think that way. It's actually their loss, if you ask me. But what an opportunity loss.
It is.
Siguro yun.
It is
Parang,
an opportunity loss.
oh,
I
na
was
parang
about to say
you,
exactly
you,
that.
you should be engaging with people
Yes.
in the grassroots, the community. People
Yes.
are actually moving public opinion. And you'd rather deal
Yes.
with me as a supplier. I don't know if they end
Yeah.
up watching this telecast eventually. I really find it disappointing.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out is another blind spot of the corporate structure.
Mm.
Because remember, they're driven by strategy and numbers, right? So the tendency, since they're being, shall we say, nagged
Measured.
about their numbers day in and day out, that's how they live their world.
Oh, ito
But
masaya. So, singit ko
oh,
lang. Their strategy hasn't resulted in any sale.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever they are doing,
Yes.
it's not
Yes.
working. And I don't
Yeah.
know if they fail to see they fail
Well,
to smell the coffee, I guess, no?
Well, Doc, we don't need to look that far. The world of tech is filled, the graveyard of tech is filled with so many of the biggest companies who suffered corporate myopia and are now a distant memory, right?
Absolutely.
I'm,
I
it's
don't
a
wish
very,
it on them though, but
yes,
eh,
but
ganun
it's
eh.
the nature of corporate myopia. Nga. This is what I'm saying. IBM was the biggest kid in the block until they said poo poo to the Microsoft and the PCs. And then when the PCs took over, Microsoft became the kid in the block until they poo pooed Google taking over the desktop, right? And now everybody is making somebody poo-poo. No, Nokia was the biggest kid in the block until this funny sounding company from Finland blew them out of the water because of excellent human design phones, and we have Nokia. And then Nokia was blown out of the water by Apple and iPad. So it's the corporate thing. That's why in 2003 they introduced this idea of open innovation. This is the point you're making. If you're a closed innovation company, you're bringing things to the market based on how you think inside. But what
Yeah.
you're pointing out is, hey, if you want to be seen by a market, you better collaborate with those who are already there because they have something to bring to the party.
Mhm.
So open innovation is, I think, one of the key things that can help us use AI for productivity. Why? Because we don't have to own AI technology. All AI technologies are now being made available through APIs, right? What we need is the mindset that we need to use AI so that we can be better at creating new value and creating new markets. This is what we need. We need to create new markets because our middle class market is so small. Even if we max out that market, it will not create the value we need to achieve our full growth potential, which is, for me, some economists have cited this, we should grow our GDP by 7% at least 7 years in a row. We call that the 7 by 7 formula. Even in the best of times, we were averaging 6.5. So meaning we're still not creating enough value Kumbaga, if we were operating a smorgasbord, given our population, we're not producing enough food so that everybody will be full. And and of course, a side issue is hindi na nga tayo nakaka-produce ng enough to make everybody full. Yung iba kumukuha pa ng so much for their plate. Now, this is another issue, right? The inequality issue. So we're dealing with two things at the same time. We have to create enough value to grow our middle class, but look at the growth of our middle class. It's relatively flat. And this is World Bank data. Look at Vietnam. Look at the growth in their middle class. Around 2008, the middle class of Vietnam already exceeded the Philippines. And in 2020, the GDP per capita of Vietnam already exceeded the Philippines. I don't know if you're able to see this. I projected the whole thing. Are you able to see this, Doc?
Yep, yep.
Okay. If you look at GDP per capita at current prices in ASEAN, 2021, look at Philippines, 3.5, and look at Vietnam, it's already 3.6. So this happened in 2020, 21. But I already knew this would happen when I already saw, and you can get this, by the way, you can download the entire ASEAN Statistical Yearbook 2022. But I already saw this when I saw that the middle class was not growing. Because if your middle class is not growing, that's already a lead indicator that you will not achieve your development goals.
Can you go back to the table so that we can flash it?
Okay,
We're
all right.
currently on the Zoom screen lang.
Okay, there you go. Are you able to see it?
Just leave it up. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is interesting statistics, no? Really good.
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm contrasting sorry.
You know, a lot of people, can I give you an anecdote? A lot of people gave me grief once upon a time when I pointed out that in aggregate, if you look at, if you go back to GDP, in aggregate, our GDP is actually one of the biggest in the world as a whole. And everyone was saying, oh, but that's not the per capita. Yeah, yeah, I get that. I mean, it's the distribution of the GDP that you're referring to. But that's actually more of the outcome. The reality is we actually command as a whole, no, a great deal of economic power, pero we don't really seem to harness it. I mean, if you apply for a World Bank loan, your total GDP is the denominator of that loan, no? So, I mean, we can then command bigger loans than some other countries, but you know, it's not used properly. And I think that's
yeah.
Of course, yeah. Economists
And,
might have a slightly different view, but I
and
think it's a loss.
especially
It's a loss
if
for
we
us.
think that in ASEAN, in the early 60s in ASEAN, we were actually the biggest economy in
Yes,
ASEAN.
absolutely, yeah.
We were.
Oh.
But and let's look at the tail of the tape. I think this is where the AI factor comes in. So if we look at exports of goods, no? So if you
Vietnam
look
is
at,
triple our value. Oh.
that's
Look at
my
that.
point. That's my point. Because most of these sorry, I should be
Imports
looking
to.
at exports. So
Exports sa taas.
if you look at
Or
this,
even
Doc,
worse.
these are manufactured goods. Most of these are manufactured goods.
This is pathetic for the Philippines.
Which means that the underdevelopment of our manufacturing is one of the worst sources of our lack of growth.
Innovation. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Look, after us, it's already Cambodia. And they're really a
Yes.
far, wala na. They were
And
really at
Doc, this is
tail.
why sometimes people find me fanatically talking
Vocal.
about this. Because I've been watching these statistics for the last 15 years and I've been saying, and I've been going to Vietnam. No, I've been there. I see how those guys work. And I saw the industrial policy, they really retooled so that, they were very well positioned. When the US and China had this trade conflict, of course, US companies started uprooting from China, right? And the factories, we were hoping some of them would go to us. Where did they go? To Vietnam. Vietnam was ready. That's why you see a lot of high-end products and you see it's made in Vietnam. Why will they send them here? Have we prepared our people, our PESAs ready for really integrated clusters where you have the main factory here and then all the suppliers in a cluster so that they're very accessible? No. Where will the supplies come from? They have to traverse really bad roads. C5 is an embarrassment because of the huge wall of truck that goes there, right? The lanes are absolutely destroyed because of all the trucks that's going through there. If you look at other countries where the trucks pass, they make them so well paid, I suppose, at the level of our T-Plex now, no, or our Capitex. But that's the standard because they know that those trucks have to go to factories. This is
Yeah.
what I mean by an industrial policy. We don't have this kind of industrial policy. That's why we're here. Now, let's go to services. I think we have a little bit of an edge on services. So, because we're still ahead of Vietnam because let's face it, we love to talk, right? And we're fluent in English. So this
Yeah.
is an edge. So many BPO, global service centers of multinationals are in the Philippines, and that's not surprising. But you cannot. I mean, if you look at absolute amounts, how can you pit that against the exports of Vietnam, right? So this is where I think AI will need to come in.
The question that I asked someone, or was it you? How come, Indonesia, I think this was Mon Ibrahim, Indonesia and Vietnam are doing better in this. And they said their policies are more agile. In other words, they can easily pass rules relative to us, no? That can encourage these kinds of things, encourage innovation.
Yeah, I would agree. That's called industrial policy
Yeah,
because you absolutely need industrial policy to guide people towards a particular direction. But the other thing we need to look at is the human factor. If you look at the real monthly earnings of people, if you look at many of our ASEAN neighbors, they're all going up, meaning people are being paid better.
yeah,
If you look at the real wages, I'm not talking nominal, no, you can increase your pay, but with inflation, it actually has less
talo pa.
value, right?
Talo pa.
Oh, we're unique. That's why I keep pushing for the human development model. If you remember my starting pitch, Doc, remember the flower?
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
Because if the people don't have the minimal material goods to live decent lives, how can they flourish? It's impossible. And how can they be competitive and think of innovative ways to use AI to make cutting edge manufacturing products to export to the world when you're not even letting them live a decent life?
Oh.
Now, adding insult to injury, look at the data for the Philippines on the left. This is just Philippines. Look at labor productivity, Doc, the red line.
Can I ask you, of course, syempre, we're discussing this
Hmm.
clearly, we're similar minds, but how come human development, oh, I don't know if I'm correct now, but human development doesn't seem to be the underlying motivation of many policies or initiatives? I mean, who's supposed to be thinking human development? Ideally, everyone
Well,
and the
well,
lawmakers, no? That's
if
why
you,
is that seeming parang
but
it's now cast aside. Parang pakiramdam ko.
well, that's the $64 million question, because if you look at the Constitution, it's very clear, right? Quality of life for all, full employment, human development yan. That's the vision in the Constitution. If you look at the Code of Corporate Governance, nandun din yon. If you look at our labor laws, andun din yon. Now, the question is, how did we become a country that marginalizes its workers? Historically, I think part of it is the cultural element we spoke about earlier. We have a very docile people. We are kind to a fault eh.
Yeah.
Ganun ang Pilipino eh. Now, which would be terrific because we are admired by people all over the world, In some hospitals in the UK, patients insist on a Filipino nurse. They will not accept anyone else because they know how caring Filipino nurses are. The problem is when you have a docile, caring people and you have abusive, exploitative leaders. That is a problem. It's
Yeah,
a bad
that goes back to
combination.
the
Oo.
conspiracy theory, di ba, na
It's a bad
the,
combination.
parang did the elite create that or did the elite just adjust or I don't
Well,
know.
I think part of it was an adjustment because the corporate structure, remember, is an import from the West,
Tama.
right? So when the Americans took over from Spain in this fake war, remember, we were sold by Spain to the US, I think for 20 million US or something. So they imported the corporate code of
Hmm.
1905, which imported the corporate structure into the Philippines.
Copy paste lang ba yon from the American Civil Code or
Practically,
Securities Code rather,
well,
Corporation Code?
wala pa masyadong ano yan eh. The point was, remember, the corporation was a Western invention. It was
Yeah.
invented in Europe, then imported in the US. The thing in the US is that they use it to empower more people. That's why in the US, the biggest tech companies, normally, the titans own what? Malaki na yung 15%, you know? I mean, even Bill Gates and all his wealthiest colleagues combined probably do not own more than 20% of Microsoft. In the Philippines, it's the reverse. The biggest Philippine corporation, 65% of the shares are owned by only one family.
Yeah.
So that was not the intention of securities. You create a capital market, doc, so that more people can own shares. So that means if we're always going to Jollibee and enjoying Chicken Joy, we should be shareholders of Jollibee, right?
Do you know about,
Oh,
have you heard of an app called Investagrams?
yes, of course, yeah.
Do you know what happened to them?
What
Parang,
happened?
so they start, this is just my version of the story. So they started out as, just this really nice, convenient app where you can get real-time updates of the
Aha,
PSE.
aha, aha.
And their market was, I guess, young people who are really mobile. Kasi
Okay.
people like us, we call the phone if we want to buy stocks, di ba?
Yes,
Parang the
yes, that's
broker.
right.
Sila, it's all mobile.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think
tama.
they're a trade execution platform yet, but I think they wanted to get to that level. And
Parang
then
call.
they had such a big following that parang sa mga Reddit forums, they were already participating in basically potentially market moving
That can
discussions.
happen,
Yeah.
definitely. That can happen.
So what happened was, and I'm aware of this because once upon a time I tried to do a similar initiative. PSE tightened on the availability of their real-time feed. They increased the
I see,
prices.
I
So
see.
Instagram suffered. Na wala na, it's no longer a viable model
Mm,
for us. We'll just give you end
mm.
of the day.
And what was the reason given by the SEC?
I
Or
don't
was
know
it the
what
PSE?
PSE,
Mm.
PSE. I don't know
PSE.
what it
Mm.
was, but my read was I guess they wanted to be basically curtail basically Instagrams and similar apps from
Mm.
proliferating. That's just
Yeah.
my speculation.
Well,
But in my
that's
head, I found that really stupid kasi
yeah, yeah,
ito na yung new market mo. I
yeah, yeah,
mean, the problem with
exactly.
our capital markets, specifically
Yes.
equities, is the depth of it is so shallow. It's
Yeah,
just
it is.
parang it's all these big funds lang. That's why our market is so erratic and inefficient.
And
Well,
it's very small.
yeah, and while in the US or
Yeah.
everywhere else, a taxi driver could own stocks. Parang
And that is the vision.
so
And
I felt that that was a
uh,
loss for me. Parang sayang. Parang they
well,
could have updated themselves for the
but
modern
we
era.
shouldn't give up on that because
Uh,
remember, less than 3 million Filipinos own stockholder
yeah,
accounts. No,
it's
if you
ridiculous though.
if you look at Malaysia or Singapore, it's more than 35%. So we have ways to go. You have to grow the capital market because all the young new startup ventures are coming. They need the capital, so
Mm,
everybody should be able to invest.
yeah.
Pero the market itself should not be rigged. Because if it's rigged, that means
Well, it
what do I
violates the
mean?
whole principle of market forces, di
Yeah,
ba?
well,
Parang it violates.
insider trading is a major issue, right?
Oh,
Kasi si Juan de la Cruz, if he trades through an app, he needs to have access to all the public information that, Mr. Forbes part gets.
mhm.
And this is where, again, our social nature sometimes gets the better of us.
Yeah.
So minsan, everybody in Forest Park already knows the information and then si Mr. si Mr. Investor just gets the trickle of information, 'di ba? Kung magkakatira-tira, 'di ba? Parang you came to a buffet tas lahat ng roast beef mo tira-tira. Kasi exactly. Kasi yung mga nasa harap, yung malapit dun sa buffet table, they got the best parts. Ikaw nandun ka sa dulo. But in
Yeah.
a good buffet, sasabihin ng buffet manager, "Sir, pakuhain na naman natin yung nasa dulo. Punong-puno na yung plato nyo." That's why
Yeah.
in some weddings now, they enforce na a sequence, right?
Oo.
Which is why, if you look at this, if you look at this, kasi, look, if we have AI, we can even be more productive, right? If you look at the red line, this is already the productivity of Filipinos. We have
That
been in,
labor productivity. All right.
yes, yes,
Okay.
exactly. Meaning, Filipino workers are able to do more by their number compared to doing less, right? But if we had powerful AI, this will be even higher, like so,
The idea
right?
is, yeah, correct.
So this productivity increase can be harnessed. But the question is this, who will get the share? Because what we have seen is in the
Share
past,
of the productivity or share of
exactly,
the value of the
the
productivity.
value,
Oh,
because productivity produces value, right?
okay.
Meaning revenue. Kung nagtulungan tayo, kumita tayo, paano ang hatian, Doc?
Mm,
Ito nga, what the data shows is yung hatian nga is not in favor of labor. Meaning, yung hatian goes to capital.
I have a question. This chart on the left, this is as a whole.
Philippines.
Philippines lang to. Okay.
Philippines to.
And ito,
Philippines. Ito,
comparative sa
comparative.
kanan.
This is all Philippines. Kasi this
Okay.
comes from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Yung nasa kanan comes from the World Bank.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to
Yes.
decipher this as
Mm-mm.
a good old data analyst. So,
Mm-mm.
if the employment line is flat, but the labor productivity line seems to be picking up.
You mean the
That
real wage line here?
no, no, here on the left. No?
On the left. Which color are you
Si
referring to?
purple. Purple is
Level of
employment.
employment,
Oo.
yes.
Medyo nag-plateau, no? Pero yung labor
Increasing a bit,
productivity,
but not as much as possible.
yeah, like in this parang the latter 5 years, medyo
Mm.
flat-ish na siya, no?
Yes,
But
yes.
while in the same period, labor productivity has picked up. So does that
Yes, yes.
imply that our labor is more basically you hired the same amount of people, but they're able to produce more? Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
implication?
exactly. Exactly.
But their wages, on the other hand,
Are not
have
improving.
fallen.
On the average, yes. Because a cardinal principle in economics, this
That's
is basic economics.
that's strange.
Uh, the basic principle is that labor should get compensated equivalent to its marginal output.
Correct.
Meaning, the gray line should parallel the red line.
Yeah, that's strange. So that means the deficit or the
Goes to capital.
disbalance goes to the owner of the
Yes,
capital.
and to the top executives.
Wow. You should not show this chart to leftists. This is
Well,
exactly the chart they want.
yeah, well, actually, they know this.
Of
This
course
is
they
well
do.
known because this is the structural problem in the Philippines. And I make a big joke of it by just citing the buffet example. Imagine if in Vikings you all pay the same rate, but the front table always get the best roast beef, and then
May
kayo
missing
tira-tira.
line dito eh. Kasi
Oo,
this is
oo.
just me arguing out of intuition na. Kasi
Mm.
GDP looks so nice, no? That's the blue line sa taas. So that means labor productivity contributed to that, but somehow
Of course it does. Yeah.
there's a remainder, no? Like where did the rest of the GDP come from? Malamang kung hindi inflation, pero this is normalized ba for inflation. So
Ito,
it
real na to eh.
it must have come from
Wala na
infrastructure, I
inflation.
guess, more spending perhaps
Well, it comes from technology also.
from tech
Kasi alam naman natin, productivity is a function of labor and
and
technology.
technology.
Which is why I go back to my original point. More people can do more with the same number if they have technologically innovative processes, right? And naturally, that will include computers, data, information, and all of that. Which is why
Or
I
are
get
we all
very
but
concerned.
this is domestic product. I'm trying to figure out where did that this balance go. Investments.
Referring to which, the difference between this and this?
Yeah, the slope of GDP and labor seem to be in line. But towards like after 2009, for example, the GDP slope dramatically escalated. While labor generally paakyat pero not as much. And then wages are the opposite end. Wages are not going up, but GDP
Yeah,
has.
wages are always flat. Well, you can break this down kasi na-available yan sa PSA eh. But whether you're
Uh,
looking at the right or the left, talagang real wages are no. And I keep harping on this because I'm talking about human development, right? Meaning, we need to have an all minds, all hands on deck approach. But Filipinos will ask for their share. And if
you
they
might have
don't
just
get
given
it,
me. I'm just trying to connect the dots
they will
here.
migrate.
Yeah, that's one. And the
Kaya nga they
second is
migrate, doc.
the reason I've always been arguing that one of the biggest barriers, kaya nga technology is still a question mark. One of the biggest barriers to technology adoption, in my view, is the fact that companies can always get away with underpaid labor. So that's what this chart is now telling me. Na, yeah, we're growing by
Yes,
double digits, but it's because we
yes,
keep
yes,
paying
yes.
our people dismal wages. We'll hire more of them, but even at lower
And then we invest in
wages.
technology.
Yun nga, they don't
Yeah.
need to invest
Oh,
because they're growing on the basis of really baga, cheap labor. Kasi it's always a toss, like in any company, it's HR versus procurement. Diba? If you want to get something done, you either hire a supplier or
yeah,
you hire
yeah.
people. Parang ngayon, malabas, kasi I can't imagine suppliers charging low, no? So nasa HR ang bulk of the growth na sige, we'll hire more
But
underpaid
employment,
staff.
yeah, but employment is flattening na rin eh. That
Oh,
means we
yung
are not
pa.
seeing a spike in employment either.
So we're not even
So a lot
increasing
of
our
this,
headcount lumalabas, no?
no, this is really technology enabled.
Yeah.
But this is about to get very, very worse with AI.
Mm.
Kasi even our vaunted BPO, which gets 38 billion US dollars a year, that will drop
So ang
as more
mangyari
and
dyan,
more
the purple line
companies
will fall, but labor
will
productivity will
fall.
go up.
Oh,
Oo. And
yes,
then
of course.
GDP may go up also, lalabas, no?
Of course
That's
it will
really
go
bad.
up.
Kasi
That's
lalabas,
exactly that's
your,
exactly what I'm saying.
oh, your
We
company,
are we
your country will grow, but on the basis of
yes.
smaller headcount. That's
And by the
horrible.
way, this is a global threat of AI, not just in our case, but it's even worse with us because we're
It's
already struggling.
exacerbated in our case kasi nga,
Yes.
we have
Oo.
OFWs, we have BPOs, and we have
Exactly.
manufacturing, which are all
Oo.
labor-intensive industries. No?
Kaya nga if you
Oh
are you
no!
able to see are you able to see the well I'm not crying wolf ano, but
Nawala
there's
yung
some way
chart Nawala yung chart.
sorry,
Nasa
okay,
Zoom ka
well,
ngayon.
okay.
Is that The
So if you
Economist? Yan, The Economist, no?
yeah. So ito yung
World
poverty
Bank. Okay.
reduction. Ganon din. Yeah, this was featured in The Economist, but the data is the World Bank. So ganyan din. Our middle class is not growing, and we're also not reducing poverty fast enough. If you look at Vietnam again, the gray line, look at what they've done to poverty. See? And they're a communist country. Oh. Now, which brings us to the issue of development. And I learned this from Dr. Jesus Felipe. He's one of our chief economists dito sa De La Salle. No? Sinabi niya kasi, there are three absolute requirements of development. Sabi niya, and this is why you need industrial policy. Create high productivity activities.
Hmm.
High productivity. That's why AI is, for me, crucial because you can do more
But
with
here's
it.
a problem, no? Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt mo. Kasi
Yes, go ahead.
my brain cells are now firing right and
Sure,
left.
sure. Yes, wonderful.
Kasi we're now arguing, or rather, we're now saying that productivity is already, kumbaga, you already have a productivity trend, but it's on the basis of lower paid labor.
Yes, exactly.
So, sige, tapusin mo to. Kasi this is
Yes,
now
yes.
the
Yeah,
outcome. Eh.
tama.
You want
Tama,
to,
tama. Oh, this is how we need to strategize.
uh-huh.
Right? Kasi ang sabi natin, we need 7% growth at least 7 years in a row, roughly, to create the volume we need. And then we need to improve the structure of wages so that people who join in the productivity get higher wages. But how do you do that? How do you pay people more when you're hiring more,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Parang paradox, di ba? Well, you pay more by hiring more by charging more.
Yeah,
Kaya nga
the
pinakita dito
market.
ni 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 Jesus, sabi niya, compare mo ang products ng mga country na ganito to a German company, di ba? What do you notice? Complex, high value, and expensive.
Products.
So it's not an accident that German products are so expensive. It's
Because
not
they're
just
good,
because of their not just
basically,
because of the technology. It's because they pay their people very well, Doc.
to achieve
Do you
the
know?
outcomes.
Yes, of course. Do you know that a German company with at least 2,000 employees, they have a supervisory board, right? This is the top board. They have two boards, the supervisory board and the managing board. The German system is called a two-tier system, just like Indonesia. Do you know that half of the supervisory board are employee representatives
Mm.
in Germany?
Very egalitarian, no? Or at least well
Yes,
represented, broad
because
representation.
because remember, Doc, what happened to them after World War II? Hyperinflation, 1,000% inflation, which gave rise to totalitarianism. So the Germans learned their lesson. How do we make sure that we will always be a democratic, egalitarian society and we will not breed totalitarianism again?
So that's why they
Make
would
our
put that in.
make our corporate structures egalitarian by design. This is like saying the AI, which I think the original AI is the corporation. How
Mm.
do you make it align with human values, right? They make sure the employees are part of the top of it.
Yeah.
Oh. So if you pay a BMW, you pay through your nose, right? But you know that a BMW worker is paid well,
Yeah.
right? In the Philippines, you go to the high-end restaurants, high-end malls, and you ask yourself, oh, I'm paying top peso for this. I wonder if the employees are being paid well. Well, wonder no more. You can just go to the Philippine Stock Exchange and you can see the average pay of the top executives. It's all there. It's all public data, Doc. It's required by law.
Yeah, but the top executives don't represent the kind of the media. No, I was gonna mention that there is actually a glitch to this because of the BPO industry who are technically supporting these, I guess, high-end companies which produce high-end goods. But in a way, they're benefiting from the low wage situation. So in a
Who
way,
is the day that is benefiting from the what?
no, no, I was arguing now na kasi you're saying in Germany the products are good, they're expensive but because they also pay
And
their
the people
people
are paid well.
well.
Yes, that's right.
Parang ngayon nagkaroon ng this is like an AI solving for the goal but in an unexpected way. We are now supporting these high-end companies with
Ah,
expensive
yes, I know
goods.
what you mean.
But
I know
because
what you mean.
Philippine
Yes,
labor is so cheap,
yes,
nagkaroon bigla. So technically
yes.
the BPO industry is a
Yeah,
glitch
yeah,
that supports that,
yeah.
which perpetuates this
Well,
cycle. No?
well, you're pointing out the sad case of the race to the bottom. You're right. So certain services that are not high-end manufacturing become outsourced. That's
Yeah.
true. And in the outsourcing of global services, they tend to find the less expensive global services. Since we're fluent in English, they can outsource to us. But the average BPO employee can earn upwards of 25K up. In fact, some certified engineers in the Philippines earn less than that. So we're one
Actually,
of the
that's
few
the
countries.
conundrum nga for the manufacturing
Yun
industry.
nga, di ba? So
They're
ibig
eating
sabihin,
each other
even if
up.
we say, exactly. So even if we say na mura yung ating BPO comparatively, that's higher than even engineers here. The point
Yeah.
is, ito yung sinasabi natin. Services have to be more advanced. Kasi at the rate we're doing services, this will be taken over by AI. We better do some KPO in a hurry.
No, but
KPO is
that
very
was the red line kanina,
mm,
the labor productivity. Are
mm,
the argument now, presumably that includes the BPOs, no? Is a testament to how good our labor is, but the wage line doesn't follow. And part of that
yes.
issue is because of
Yes.
outsourcing. Kasi you're able to keep wages, although they're relatively higher than like the local
Okay.
average.
Let's yeah. I think tama ka eh. We should deconstruct this. Remember,
Oo.
if you get the data on the labor contribution of BPOs is very small compared
So
to the total
wala siya doon.
Yes, yes. The top employers in our country is agriculture and retail services,
Okay.
meaning sales ladies and farmers. Kaya nga, so if we now, let's talk retail. One company alone has 80 malls, right? The next company has 70 malls. We're a country of malls. We have the poorest people, but hundreds of malls. Go figure. And in those malls, we consume a lot. We like to buy. And many of the underpaid people are part of what keeps this
System.
mega system of malls running, di ba? I'm not just talking about
Perpetuating the
sales ladies,
system.
the people. Exactly. So what I call is not a trickle down system. This is a trickle up system. Trickle up. No? That's why tayo, if we were shareholders, we can actually advocate. And this is what I advocate. I own shares in these companies. I attend the shareholders meetings. I always ask, so what are we doing to improve the lot of workers? That's why we
You know what
released the
would be a
covenant
good
for shared prosperity.
comparison? Kasi I found that parang those lines compelling. We need to add the corporate earnings growth of maybe the top 1,000. Kasi nga, it's always for
I
me,
have that.
it's
I have
always
that.
jarring for me when we
Yeah.
talk about
That's a big share of GDP.
exactly poverty and
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
unemployment or labor conditions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the other channel, you see, oh, so and so bank posted 30%,
Yes.
50%,
Yes. Yes.
80% growth. Sabi ko, good grief, though. I mean, if you look at the corporate earnings, we're not doing too bad. But if you look at
We're not.
talagang
We're not.
there's really a value extraction
Yeah.
somewhere, no, na
Yeah.
nasisira
Well,
talaga.
again, you use the right term. Ito kasi GDP growth, a big chunk of this is corporate growth.
Yeah.
And then what you're saying is exactly on point. On the corporate growth, the real wages of employees has to be monitored,
Yeah.
right? Kasi nga, based on my latest data, the top 100 conglomerates, so I'm not talking about corporations, I'm talking about groups, no? These are family groups usually,
Yeah.
account for more than half of GDP.
Mm.
So we are a country of 100 million plus, but only 100 conglomerates account for half of the economy. Can you imagine that? So that means that so much concentration of wealth among so few. In fact, Shell Habito of NEDA once said when he was head of NEDA, he was saying that 70% of our GDP growth, at least during his time, 70% of GDP growth was equal to the growth in wealth of the top 40 families in the country.
Mm.
You get that?
Mm.
So if you deconstruct this growth, most of this is equal to the increase in wealth of just the top 40 families. So in other words, what we have, Doc, is essentially a feudal system.
Yeah. Call it nga neo-feudalism
Yeah,
as opposed to
it's
as
a
opposed to
neo-feudal
democratic.
system. Well, we have the trappings of democracy, but the distribution of wealth is feudal.
It
Why?
is.
Because we are extremely differential to people in high places.
So
We're like that,
hierarchy.
whether it's a politician or a corporate magnate, it's the same. But what we're saying is, no, we have to democratize the economy. Everybody should have a stake in it. It's a buffet. That's what the Constitution says. It's a buffet. Everybody has to have access to the buffet because they're like flowers. No? And here, ito yung key eh. That's why I keep going back to this. To do this, you really need high productivity tools, and AI, I think, can help. For example, there was this company in the US when ChatGPT came out. This chef, ano siya, pizza chef eh. Ang ginawa lang niya, he asked ChatGPT to create pizza recipes for him. So his sales tripled. People would come because every week he has a new selection of AI
So
generated.
content creation pero food. Ganun nangyari.
Exactly. So
Oo.
sabi niya, sasabihin ko lang, oh, for this week, this is the theme. Make me 20 recipes for ganyan. Alam mo naman ng LLM, di ba? And then he cooks it. And then, lalabas lang naman yun for that week eh. Because he'll never run out of recipes, right? That's an example. Di ba? Of course, ang maganda naman sa recipes, and he's a chef, wala namang risk doon, di ba? Kasi minsan, it will spout useless recipes. But as a chef, alam niya, oh, this won't work. So he strikes it out. Kasi hindi naman siya factual eh, creative eh, di ba? So,
Yeah.
as we said, LLMs are not designed to tell you the truth, no? But it gives you ideas, so you can use that.
It's kaya
And
nga
what?
ano, may advocacy in the summit was you use generative AI to explore kind of the unknown unknowns as opposed
Yeah,
to
I think that makes sense. Yeah,
bring it
it's an
back to the
exploratory tool.
structured ano. Kaya nga ano eh, I mean I was arguing with someone on LinkedIn recently na how come daw the enterprise use cases for AI have not yet emerged. And well, on the one hand, I said, well, you have to be specific. Because if you're talking about discriminative AI, it's been there forever. You know, and you could argue that good old fashioned logistic
Yeah, it's been there
regressions,
forever. Yeah,
are part of
LLMs
that.
talaga yung lumabas
Yung
eh.
generative ang
Oo.
malabo.
Yeah,
And there's certainly reasons for it. Number one, the
yeah.
lack of understanding. But also, the enterprise environment is all about managing known knowns. You know, it's not about unknown unknowns. No one builds a business on that, or at
Yeah,
least they don't
well,
do that
I
by default.
yeah, I think that's why the point you're making is we cannot stay inside the box. Eh?
Forever, yeah,
We have to
absolutely.
innovate and get out of the box.
Yeah.
Which is why I wanted to make the point na because there's this book and I highly recommend it. You know, Clayton Christensen was for me one of the greatest management gurus. He has passed on. But this book, The Prosperity Paradox, is it makes the point. Now, first, since we're talking about terms now, innovation, according to them, is a change in the process by which an organization transforms labor, capital, materials, and information into products and services of greater value, which is what we need in our country, right? It cannot be business as usual. We cannot be making chinelas and ano forever. So we need to really make innovative things. But the key here is that it has to be market creating innovations.
Yeah.
Because Christensen warns the tendency is we go towards what we call efficiency innovations. Efficiency innovations is what we saw earlier, no? Doing more with less.
Yeah.
Let people go, but grow your revenue. And you're doing that by targeting existing consumers. The problem is it eliminates jobs and you have negative development. What we need to do is what Christensen calls market creating innovations. So we make, and fintech is a perfect example of this. Kasi you make it simple and affordable, everyone can use it. The unbanked was the greatest untapped market forever, right? Then when fintech came along, my gosh, now my magtataho, I can pay him with GCash. So it will now create jobs because suddenly everybody now can go into payments, right? And so it enables development if it's creating new revenue streams for everyone.
And
This is
I'll
what,
be the first to tell you, this third
yeah.
column is completely either ignored or discouraged by the
Mm,
existing system in the Philippines.
mm,
Kumbaga,
mm,
big corporations, the usual, the 40 families, as you say, will not want you to create a new market that will
yes,
kind of detract from their
yes.
dominance. And then even the existing structures, like I can only point to DOST, for example, as the only systemic structure to invest in innovation. Even their process is, hopelessly it, I don't know, inefficient. Maybe they're not
Well,
putting out innovations
maybe we
fast
need
enough.
to explain this to them.
Yeah.
We need to explain this to them. Yung first point mo, it's human nature. Everyone is dominant and will discourage new players, right?
Uh-huh.
That's why we have a competition commission. In
ACC.
the US, yeah, in the US, they had the antitrust commission. Those are the guys that went after Microsoft, remember? When Microsoft was squeezing Netscape and Compaq and all the others, they sued Microsoft for antitrust.
Antitrust.
In
Parang si
fact,
Rockefeller lang din once upon a time.
exactly, Standard Oil. Ang gagawin nga ng antitrust ng US was to carve Microsoft into two companies where you have the operating system on the one side and the applications on the other, right? Nag-behave na yung Microsoft, so they kind of backtrack. But in the EU, they were fined tremendously for their practices. Kasi remember when Netscape came out, you had to pay $70 per Netscape browser, right? Tapos ang ginawa ng Microsoft, they made the Internet Explorer free. And that's exactly undercutting, di ba? That's how to kill competition. You make the product free. And then the defense was, it was innovation.
Yeah.
It's like saying, it's like Toyota being the most bought car, suddenly saying, oh, we've decided to put radios in our cars. And they're not, and they're Toyota brand radios. We don't need Pioneer anymore. And then all these radio companies will complain, that's not part of a car. No, it's innovation. Now all cars will have a radio. Sorry. Oh, can you do that? Well, they got away with it because they explained it was innovation. But that's anti-competitive behavior. People need choices.
Yeah.
And nung wala pang choice, we saw naman what happened here. Telcos bought each other out, right? Restaurants buy each other out. And I say, where's the choice?
Yeah.
We need more players, not less. Because people, if they're getting terrible service, where can they go if they only have two options or three? That's a duopoly or a oligopoly. And monopolies and oligopolies are evil
Yeah.
because you don't have choice. What we need are more choices so that we can grow markets.
Yan ang problema.
Yan
I
ang
think the top
uh,
40are all oligopolies. They're cartels, basically.
yes,
Uh,
but we have government structures, so we have to support our government and say, look,
break them up.
Mr. Yeah, or at least tell them, no, 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 you can't do that, diba? I mean, right, when PLDT bought out Sun, of course, wala pa yung competition commission So that was allowed. If that purchase was proposed today, the competition commission will not allow that.
Yeah.
At tatlo na nga lang ang players, bibilin mo pa yung pangatlo. Di dalawa na lang kayo. Ano yan, lokohan? O, di ba? Like when Jollibee bought Mang Inasal because they had their own barbecue, Jollibee, but it could not compete with Mang Inasal. Mang Inasal really got the imagination of people.
Yeah.
Again, they bought. And they bought a string of other restaurants. Ako, I'm a Mang Inasal fan, and I can tell you, the taste has been changing. And I've been giving feedback to Mang Inasal.
Uh,
Which is probably good kasi lumalabas yung Bacolod Inasal, so many options. But for me, if you buy ano, you have to make it better. Hindi yung you buy it para wala ka lang kalaban and then you make it mediocre. Hindi ganoon. 'Di ba? Kaya nga may competition so that everybody gets better. That's the whole point. Not to dominate so that you can get the total share of value and monopolize it. So
Yeah.
this is what we need. We need to harness the entrepreneurial drive of Filipinos because now they have access to fintech, but now they need access to good AI and to be educated so that they can create itong sinasabi natin na mga highly valuable I really like the way Jesus Felipe explains it kasi and you can catch his talks on video, no? Kasi sinasabi niya talaga and this is where he for me this is the kicker
Yeah.
because if you don't go here you just produce this but you don't do this, you end up gouging the customers. You
Mhm.
don't grow the middle class. So it's like shooting yourself in the foot. You're making yourself rich but there will be nobody around to buy your products kasi you're
Yeah.
not uplifting their lives, di ba? So you can see now why I think good AI is absolutely necessary, but we have to make sure it is aligned. And alignment has to be, for example, if in any job at all, let's say you're a content creator, so you need
Yeah.
better content, right?
Yep.
So iba yung Grammarly that improves your uh, grammar, right? Iba naman yung LLM that claims it knows.
Yeah.
And then you now make content based on an LLM. Eh hindi nga, you have to be very careful about that. It
Yeah.
wasn't designed for that.
For sure.
Kasi lahat nung wala namang curation yun, pinasok lang lahat doon, then it just makes a JPEG of knowledge. I call it JPEG eh. Yung LLMs are JPEG knowledge. It's lossy, di ba? Kasi it gets the average. Kaya pag minagnify mo, pixelated na lahat. Kaya pag tinanong mo si ChatGPT,
Yeah, the
sasabihin niya,
underlying
well,
technology is related to ano nga, compression.
it is. Exactly.
So
It is compression. It is
masarap
knowledge
pag-usapan yan
compression.
later yan. Knowledge compression. Dati kasi it's image compression lang and you have to restore it back to its
Yun lang
former
nga
glory.
eh. But how do you restore it? There's no way, di ba?
Medyo blurry na
Kaya
siya.
nga, even for graphics people, di ba? They go for a BMP or a PNG or even yung mga ganyan. Ganyan din dapat. What we need to develop are large language models that are designed to tell the truth.
Correct.
And this designs for this are already have been proposed.
Mm.
Kaya lang, they're not as easy to generate as deep learning models.
Yeah,
Kasi deep
actually
learning
that's
not,
another challenge. Maybe
yeah,
we can tackle it in another chat. No? I think by nature, there's a natural, I guess, trajectory towards monopolies, economic monopolies,
yeah,
because
it's a structure of the world eh.
it's costing a lot of money to develop these models. I think that's sort of an inefficiency at the moment because it doesn't feel like it should be that expensive, but it is what it is, right? So,
Well, but we have to call it out, Doc. It
uh,
doesn't mean that because you have an expensive JPEG model, you have something good.
yeah.
It just looks impressive. The picture looks impressive, but if you look closely, there's nothing there.
Mm.
But kaya lang, people are so impressed. You know, when you see a Photoshop picture of something, then syempre you're impressed. But any photographer will look deeply and say, hey, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, yeah,
Diba? Then you
right.
realize, oh, it's lossy. Okay, so we'll use a non-compression. Ano? If we want to improve the world, we cannot settle for compression knowledge, Doc.
Yep.
It's like my students, you know, I teach courses and then they are all required to read the book and then I discuss the book with them and additional readings.
Hmm.
And then I talk to some students, you know what they do? They don't even get the book. You know how they survive for the whole term?
Oh,
The PowerPoint slides.
oo nga. Kasi kinompress mo
Oh,
na yung knowledge into the slides.
exactly. And I told them, do you know how those PowerPoint slides are made? It wasn't even the author who made them. The publishing company outsources that to some freelance
Some
faculty
guy.
member who does it. And it wasn't even approved by the authors. And then imagine studying this whole course just using the part. It's like reading literature using Cliff Notes. Remember Cliff Notes, Doc? So if you read
Yeah. I
Shakespeare,
used to be a fan. Sorry to confess.
exactly. Well, that's true. Well, you're not naman going to be a professor of literature, right? But for them, they're learning management. So this is
Yeah.
a course in strategic management. Kaya ako, I really insist. Second day of classes, I check who has the book.
Mm.
And if you don't have it, get it.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to learn this class only from PowerPoints, you will have the most superficial knowledge out there. Well, I
Oh
shouldn't have
yeah.
worried because now they just study it using ChatGPT.
Mm.
So they prepare for a class and say, okay, we're going to have a discussion on competitive advantage and innovation. What are the key points I should bring up in class because my teacher is very demanding? Well, you can start by maybe saying this, and then you can segue into this, and then you can cite this, and jujujuju. Sabi ko, OMG, tumatayo ang balahibo ko. And I always tell them, make sure you do not become a professional bullshitter. Because now we can already say that LLMs are automated bullshitters, right? It's not a curse word, it's a technical word.
Yeah. Yeah.
But imagine graduating from a bachelor's degree in a university because you became an expert bullshitter. Sabi ko, if you're a bullshitter, why should I hire you? I can already hire an LLM, which is a cheaper bullshitter. Why will I hire you, right, Doc?
Correct.
That means you have to differentiate yourself from an AI
From
chatbot.
a typical BS.
Yes. And how do you differentiate
Oo,
yourself? By
tama.
being a critical thinker, by creating innovative value, by challenging lossy average knowledge with out-of-the-box thinking. That's how you differentiate yourself. So ginagana pa sila. Kulang na lang, I shake their head and say, you will not be hired. They will just hire a chatbot because you sound like a chatbot. Ganun ko sila. Of course, they think I'm crazy. But I'm telling them, I'm trying to save your future because I know between your ears you have so many ideas, so many dreams for your country, so many dreams for the planet. Let them come out. Then group among yourselves and say, we will have a startup that will really use AI in a very progressive way. But you have to govern it properly because right now there's a gap. Yung progress on capabilities is so fast, but the progress on alignment is so slow.
Yeah. We
This
need to
gap,
talk to there's this guy I introduced to you, si Miguel, is
yes,
in that
yes.
realm. Maybe in our next conversation, let's
Yes,
pick
yes.
it up.
Did you mean to end by 7:30? So we have just
Well,
15.
yeah, we're kind of
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
hour, but or
Yeah,
actually hindi
tama.
na, 2 hours na. Because we
Oh, that's
started
right. That's right.
5:30, diba?
Oo, tama,
So,
tama. Yeah, so I think let me summarize with this slide that I wanted to,
sige, go for it.
sort of use
This
as a
has been
summary.
very rich, no? We need an immediate follow-up. See, we have
Yeah,
barely
kasi I
scratched the
wanted to
surface.
bring the national development thing into the picture.
Yeah.
I kind of like to summarize it this way in terms
Oh,
of imagery, di ba?
sige.
So I said we need to really make sure our people develop because the end of all development is the human being.
Yeah.
What's the point of citing GNP? Like, I mean, even the
So
US,
abstract.
they're still the highest GNP country, but they're dealing with massive poverty, massive political upheavals, an opioid crisis that won't go away, homelessness is growing, right? So what's GNP for?
Yeah.
The measure is human development.
Mm.
Even the World Bank has said, uplift the bottom 40%. That's the only meaningful measure of development. Uplift the bottom.
Yeah.
But to do that, you need businesses because businesses create value
Mm.
and they create jobs. That's why business is key. But what kinds of business are we talking about? We're talking about businesses that behave like Wi-Fi routers. They spread value. They don't concentrate value. Businesses that are value concentrators are the enemy of development because
Yeah.
they will create instability. They will create mass migration of talent. They will create populism and upheavals, which is what happened in the US, right?
Yeah.
When Trump got elected, it was because of the disenfranchised middle states
Mm.
who were saying, well, the coastal states have it all well, no, but I don't live in New York. I don't live in LA. All the manufacturing jobs in my state were exported to Mexico and China. What's in it for me? So they voted in this guy.
Yeah.
And he said he was going to change the system. Did it change? Well, not true. So what we need, therefore, is to achieve the vision of the Constitution, which is to have this picture on the right, is we now need people who are machine ready. This is a term used by Nada Sanders in her book, The Hugh Machine. They're saying that we really need to harness the best in AI because we need to create value like we've never seen before. And for us, the challenge is we have so many poor people.
Yeah.
Let's not look at poor people as a problem. They are an opportunity. In Africa, the really maverick uh, startup leaders there who created the mobile phone industry in Africa, they couldn't get funding because they were being told by the financiers that, but people are so poor. How can they pay for your mobile services? They're now multimillionaires many times over because they said, no, Africans, they travel to another province, they need to talk to their mothers and they have to line up on one phone. They need to be able to use a mobile phone. And they argued, and now Africa has a booming telecommunications industry. And you have not seen anything yet. No, they're doing this for all other services. And this is not new to us because the Telecommunications Deregulation Act for us was an eye opener, right? In the mid 90s, the PLDT monopoly was challenged by Senators Magsaysay, Senator Osmeña, because when I was younger, we all had party lines and you had to line up for 3 to 5 years to get a line, right? Thanks to the senator, suddenly even a fisherman can have three phones. Di ba?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If we repeat the same thing that we did with telecommunications, with all other industries, make it inclusive, make capital available, and always target a human need, because telecommunications met a real human need. Mothers needed to coordinate with their children, businesses need to coordinate on inventory, etc. It was perfect. But there are so many more of those waiting to be met because so many Filipinos are in need of human development. And if we can use AI to target all of those needs, wow, we will produce the 7% growth over 7 years that we need. But more importantly, it will be inclusive because the target of the market creation innovation are the people themselves.
Yep.
So I think that would be my summary statement, Doc. Thanks for having me in this exchange with you
Yeah,
today.
likewise, there's just so much unexplored territory, and yeah, I'm happy that we recruited this series. So yeah, looking forward to another conversation.
Wonderful. Till next time, Doc. Bye bye.